she told the story, it went like this. She said they were in the Kennedy Airport, in the lounge at the Kennedy Airport, and her husband was sipping his martinis plural, and he was braying like a jackass to anybody who would listen around him. And all of a sudden she got up and slipped out the back door, and she never came back. And she says what it was the brutal mediocrity. It was the simple, brutal mediocrity over and over and over again of being married to a person who refused to grow and who refused to learn, but was stuck in the egotism and the drunkenness of a mediocrity that she finally got to where she couldn't stand it anymore, and she had to slip out the back and just not return. The brutal mediocrity. And mediocrity can be brutal. And believe me, it is very easy to have those same sort of feelings at this time in the history of the world, on this 4th of July weekend, as we face the difficulties of our times and as we face the petty politics of our day and the people who call us in our fear and in our anger and our frustration. I'm so sick of people calling me to something lower, asking me to reach down in my anger and my frustration instead of asking me to reach higher. I am so sick of a political situation on this 4th of July weekend when we betray our founders by being asked to reach down instead of being asked to reach up to something higher. I am sick of the mediocrity, of the brutal mediocrity of the party politics that I see all and hear all around me. I'm sick of it. Aristotle said that it is a good thing. When we manage to do something good for one person, that is a good thing. But it is more divine to do something good for a nation, for a city-state, for a parish, for a city. It is more divine, it is more godlike to do something good for everyone and not just for ourselves. Aristotle, a pagan philosopher, calls us to reach up higher than just being worried about our own fear and our own anxiety and the size of our own wallet. And Aristotle and Plato and Cicero, they all agreed, and they've all been quoted by every political theorist about how we are going to live our social life until it got to us. And I don't hear anybody talking about the common good anymore. I don't hear the people who want to be elected as our officials, I don't hear them talking about the common good. And all we have to do is look at the founders of our nation, the men and women who founded our nation, and they talked constantly about the common good. All we have to do is read John Adams. All we have to do is look at Hamilton. All we have to do is look at Benjamin Franklin. They talked about the need to create a common good and about how they were sacrificing what they had to create something that would create a military, that would create a civic government, that would create roads and commerce, that would create schools and education, so that you and I would have a country to inherit. They were about the common good. They were about reaching up to something higher than just doing something for ourselves or one more person. They were about doing something good for everybody. And they had their challenges and they failed to reach up perfectly, but at least they tried to reach up to something higher. They refused to sit in the brutal mediocrity of reaching down to what is lowest in human nature and just taking care of themselves. And so, on this 4th of July weekend, I think it's good for us to review what the church teaches us about living together in society. For what the church teaches us is we must work for the common good. our gospel today, Jesus sends out his disciples. And how does he do it? He doesn't send them out, armed and with heavy packs and they got everything they need so they can be completely independent. He sends them out with light equipment, travel in light, so that they're going to have to depend on those other people that they meet who are part of the Jesus movement. They've got to travel light, and they've got to go to those people who are part of the Jesus movement. And Jesus sends them out as signs to everywhere they go. They will be signs. They will be something that says to everyone, wherever they go, I'm part of the new Jesus movement. And that movement is about sharing with one another and caring about one another and about opening your homes to one another and about helping one another. It's not about living independently. It is about living interdependently. It is about cooperating with one another. It's about the common good. It's about reaching up to something higher. Even though they're being sent like sheep among wolves, it's not going to be easy to reach up higher. It's not going to be easy. And so what does our church, what does our faith tradition tell us, as well as our founding fathers and mothers, about how we are to live in society for the common good on this 4th of July weekend? There are things that work against the common good, both actions and thoughts, and we have to work against both of them. We have to reach up in that struggle for what is better for everyone. The common good is about saying, I will give up some of my independence in order to be interdependent with you. I will give up some of my own personal independence, so that you and I can cooperate together. We can find a way to cooperate together for the sake of more than just ourselves. That's what the common good is about. Parishes run on it. There are actions that destroy the common good and work against it. There are free riders who use the common resources and never pay anything back. There are drainers, people who drain the common resources, the human resources and the resources that we all have inherited from the Creator. They drain them away and they never replace what they drain. There are polluters who poison the common resources that belong to all and destroy what is there for future generations. Those are actions that are contrary to the common good that our church calls us all to work for. There are ideas that work against the common good, and you can hear them everywhere now in our political situation. And we are to work against those ideas and to work for the opposite. One of the ideas that works against the common good is the idea that there are second-class citizens. Is that there's some group of people. They could be women, they could be people of color, they could be people with a different sexual preference, but there's some group of people, and we have to get that group of people and make them a second-class citizen so they don't have a place to come into the leadership and share their gifts, because they couldn't possibly be as intelligent and as imaginative as we are, so we can't let them in. That is contrary to our tradition. Absolutely contrary to our tradition. But we're still guilty of it when it comes to women in the church. And so I'm not pointing the finger at you, I'm also pointing it around to me. We have a lot to reach up to in the church when it comes to treating women as equal as men. But we have to work for it. That's what working for the common good is. And sometimes we hear the idea that we hear people talk about the economy like it's just about money. Like it's just about whatever the stock market is doing or whatever the GDP is doing. And the economy is not about money. It's not primarily about money. It can never be primarily about money for Catholics. The economy is about a system that we set up, a social system we set up so that goods and services can flow, so there's a steady flow of goods and services to everyone. Education, clean water, clean air, medical services, civil services, We set up an economy is a system that we set up. We invented it. We make it. We can change it. And we set up a system so that goods and services flow to everyone in an equitable manner to all people for the sake of lifting up everybody for the sake of the common good. That's what an economy is. Money happens to be a very convenient form of exchange in an economy, but economies are not primarily about money. They're about who's eating, who's got a place to live, who's getting an education, and who's not. That's what economies are primarily about. It happens through money, but that's not what economies are. Economies are set up for the good of all, for the common good. That's what they are. And we hear the idea all the time, especially in our culture, that promotes an excessive individualism. We hear all the time that the ideal is to be independent. Is to count on nobody. Is to have our problems, our little set of problems, and more depend only on our own answers. So our problems get bigger and bigger, and our answers get smaller and smaller. But we're independent, so that's what matters. We're not called to be independent as Catholics. We are called to be interdependent. And we hear all the time, we hear this crazy sort of thing where it's like, well, there's, on the one hand, you're telling me that I've got to choose, because all we can hear is we can only hear these things in terms of conservative and liberal, Democrat and Republican. It's all we can hear nowadays. And the church is not talking about either one of those. It's talking about a higher viewpoint that looks down on them and says, okay, liberals, you have something to offer. Conservatives, you have something to offer for something that is higher, for a higher viewpoint, for reaching up to something higher. You're not the whole story. There are higher values that are the story. They inform what is on the lower values. We don't go to party politics to find out our Christian values. Our Christian values tell our party politics how they are to be shaped and formed. That's what our ancestors knew. That's what our Catholic ancestors knew. They knew how to reach up to something higher. And what that tells us is that we cannot have the ideal of being this little lone island of independence. We are not called to either be socialism, because that's what the conservatives and the liberals go, oh, well, you're talking about socialism. And then, oh, well, you're talking about excessive individualism. Like those are the two choices. That's a false choice. That's not what our faith doesn't call us to either one of those. False choice. What our faith calls us to is to give up some independence in order to be interdependent and to cooperate with one another for the sake of everybody. And the church doesn't say how to do that. It doesn't say what the form of government is to do that. It just says we have the responsibility to do it, and we have to find ways to do it. And the church doesn't care whether, it doesn't specify. It just says that's the responsibility. It's our responsibility to figure out how to do it with one another, to have the hard conversations, to sit down and work through the problems and find a way. That we cannot just be excessively independent and individualistic, but we can cooperate for the good of all. It's our responsibility. It's not about conservative and liberal. It's something higher than that. It calls both to be better, to something higher. Now, somebody from the last Mass came up to me and said, I liked your homily, Father, but I thought you were mad at us. Sounded like you were mad at us. And I said, I'm not mad at anybody here, but I am mad. I am mad that I hear that I live in a country where everybody keeps saying in the media, everybody's mad, and we should take that opportunity to reach down to something lower. I'm mad about that, and I want to take it as an opportunity to reach up something higher. Isn't that what our faith calls us to? To reach up higher. If we're mad and we're scared, and we're paranoid, and we're worried, then that's an opportunity to reach up higher, to something higher, so that we're working for the common good of everybody, and not just ourselves. That's what the mission that Jesus passes on to us, and the mission that he passes on to his church. And so as we come to the table and to sharing sacred food so that we can live holy lives, that's Let's be aware that on this 4th of July weekend, here's the way to be a good Catholic citizen. We got to reach up higher. We got to, in the midst of all of the craziness and the brutal mediocrity of the media and the events that take place around us and around the world, in the midst of that mediocrity, we are called to reach up to something higher. And it will not be easy. And there's no easy, and anybody who tells you easy is crazy. It will be the hardest thing we ever do, is for people from all different cultures and ways of life to learn to cooperate. It will be absolutely the hardest thing we've ever done. But it is at least something to reach up to that is higher instead of lower.